Hey everybody, this is JDGaming, back today with a post-Chaos Impact update to Aromages. I'll be frank, a few months ago when I did an update to Aromages, I just had an itch to play this deck again. It's a plant theme, I've loved plants ever since they were huge in the Synchro era, and I had no idea we were going to get any new cards for the theme. In fact, just like a few days after I created that video, we ended up getting announcements that Chaos Impact, or I'll call it CHIM from now on, would have cards like Aromage Support, Marjoram, and a bunch of other support for the theme. And although I am not incorporating a majority of those cards in this particular build, I did want to update this previous combo Aromage deck that I had been playing around with most recently, and then give my thoughts on the other cards, what kind of potential they may have going forward for the theme if you want to build a different type of this kind of a deck. But anyway, that's a short introduction there. This is going to be a let's build like always, so I'm going to go and explain all my choices, my thoughts for why things are in here in the quantities that they are. But if you just want to see the typical alphabetical profile, you can feel free to click the description box down below, where the handy table of contents will take you to that section or any segment of the video that you so choose. And if you still have questions after that, feel free to leave a comment down below. But I do also want to let you guys know I do have an in-depth introduction that I kind of alluded to for this theme, talking about everything before Chaos Impact on the channel, as well as the most recent version of this Aromage combo deck prior to this video that you're watching now, that I'll put in the iCard in the top right hand corner. So if you want to check out those for some more insight into the theme, especially if you're new, feel free to go ahead and give those a watch. But without further ado, let's build Aromages. The first step in building any deck is to establish a theme and to build a core that supports the theme's goals. And while I will talk a little bit later in this video about some of the other Aromage cards, the one that I want to feature that we're going to build this deck around is the new level 6 Synchro monster. Aromage Support Marjoram is a generic Synchro monster, plant, 2200 attack, 2000 defense, and her effect reads, while your life points are higher than your opponent's, your opponent cannot target any of your plant monsters you control with card effects. You can use the following effects of Sweet Marjoram once per turn, so hard once per turn. Having additional copies won't help, but still very useful effects. First, upon Synchro Summon, you can add one of the theme's continuous trap cards from your deck to your hand, either a Humid Winds, Dried Winds, or the new Blessed Winds cards from your deck directly to your hand, and then you can set it and do all your plays. The second ability is once per turn. If you gain life points, you could target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. It actually is a mandatory effect, so I kind of misspoke there. You do have to target one of your opponent's cards if they have one and try to destroy it, but it's very reminiscent of Dried Winds, another card from the theme that you can actually search off of the Sweet Marjoram. And so what we're going to try and do is make it very easy to Synchro Summon our Sweet Marjoram, add our Dried Winds to our hand, and then by setting this and playing it, every time we gain life points, we're going to destroy 2 of our opponent's cards each and every turn. So that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish here when we start off with our core. So with that in mind, I want to start off by playing 3 copies of our Plant 𝗿𝗍𝖄𝐻. This card is the backbone of any plant type of strategy that I like running, especially given the fact that the Link monster we're going to try and summon just needs 2 plant monsters, which this card allows us to do. Summoning Plant 𝗿𝗍𝖄𝐻 either through normal summon or special summon by something like Lone Fire Blossom will allow us to discard a card from our hand in order to special summon a copy of �11𝗍𝗄𝐻, who then, when special summoned by 𝗿𝗍𝖄𝐻, lets us add a copy of our Brilliant Fusion to our hand. But as if that weren't enough, we now have 2 plant monsters in play, which means we can turn them into our Aromage Support Jasmine. Now remember, this card is an awesome card, not only for Aromages, but for plants in general. It provides 2 arrows diagonally, prevents itself and your other plant monsters it's pointing to from dying in battle as long as your life points are higher. So combo that with our Sweet Marjoram, and you have protection from targeting by card effects as well as destruction by battle, and gives you the ability to mimic Lone Fire Blossom by tributing a monster she's pointing to in order to fetch a monster from your deck in defense position. And if you happen to gain life points, you get another bonus yet, adding any plant monster from your deck to your hand. So lots of really good things there. But effectively, once we get out our Jasmine, we will activate our Brilliant Fusion, which lets us send a Gem Knight monster. I'm choosing Garnet in this case because level 4 Earth is pretty decent in this particular strategy, as well as a copy of the level 1 basically graveyard-centric tuner monster Aromage Support 𝗍𝗄𝐻, which will let us summon out our Gem Knight Seraph Knight, and this sets us up perfectly for the play we are trying to do. because 𝕮𝖵𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓𝖙 gives us an additional normal summon, which means it's possible for us to summon something like a level 1 plant tuner, or something like a lone fire blossom that we may have extra of, in order to then go and summon out the material we need for Seraphonite to synchro summon up into our sweet Marjoram. And heck, if you think about it, because we still have access to the Jasmine, anything you normal summon could be tributed off in order to bring out a level 1 tuner monster, and then level 1 tuner plus level 5 Seraphonite gives us our sweet Marjoram. So very easy in getting that combo to go off, and it could even be something not necessarily related to another monster card. Don't forget, playing something like Aroma Garden or Poison of the Old Man to gain you life points will allow you to have a higher life total than your opponent in most opening game scenarios, and that means you can use the fact that you have an Aroma monster to special summon Angelica from your graveyard, and then she can be a level 1 tuner for this process as well. So effectively, the Brilliant Fusion engine is the best that I could come up with that synergizes perfectly with the plants, that lets us go and just get an additional summon out, and that lets us synchro summon our sweet Marjoram. What that ultimately does for us is we have Jasmine and Marjoram protecting each other, Dried Winds searched off of the Marjoram, and anytime we now gain life points, we can pop 2 cards and search a copy of Angelica, who then can be used to then next turn discard her, target an Aromage in your graveyard, and then destroy 2 more cards and search, because you're gaining life points equal to the attack points of the monster that you use with the Angelica. So that's kind of our basic setup here. We'll talk a little bit now about some of the other cards that don't really fit into the theme, as well as the remainder of the deck. So as a quick aside, I want to talk about the other cards in CHIM, mainly because a lot of you guys were wondering about my thoughts on them, and ultimately I think they have potential, but they don't quite fit into that combo and the deck style that I just showed you guys. We're starting off with the main deck version of Aromage Marjoram. This card's a level 5 dark monster with 2000 attack, 1600 defense, plant like all the others, and she has the same pattern of abilities. While your life points are higher than your opponent's, you can't take battle damage from your plant type monsters being in battle, which is a decent ability, but again, the fact that she's a level 5 monster locks that kind of out of being useful most of the time. She does, however, have an additional ability that says when your plant monster dies in battle, you could special summon her from your hand and then gain 500 life, but again, that's a bit too slow for my liking, especially because you have to have one of your plant monsters die in battle, irrelevant in the first turn if you're going first, and still not the best option even if your opponent could be attacking you as well. So not a very good option. And then the other ability is if you happen to gain life points, you could target cards in your opponent's graveyard up to the number of Aroma monsters you control and banish them. So not to say this card is bad or useless, it's just not quite as combo oriented as I would like, and so I'm choosing not to play the main Marjoram in the main deck. We also have a copy of Aromage Laurel, and honestly, the first time I saw this, I thought this was a shoe-in 3 of, but it depends on the type of deck you're trying to build. So Laurel is a wind level 1 monster with 800 attack and 0 defense, also a plant, and it says if your life is higher than your opponent's, you could special summon this card from your hand, which is the main reason I thought this card is amazing. If you basically play your Aroma Garden or one of the other cards we'll talk about next that give you life points, you can bring this thing out for free at any point. If you gain life points, you can also target a tuner, rather non-tuner plant monster that is on the field and have it be treated as a tuner regardless of its level until the end of the turn. And then if it happens to be sent to the graveyard for Synchro, Link, or otherwise by battle or what else, you can gain 500 life points to trigger all your abilities. Each of these abilities is an activated one, including the special summon, and you can only activate one of each of these per turn, so you can't use multiple Laurel special summons or multiple gains or something like that. But interesting combo card. It does, however, make the deck rely a lot more on constantly having that higher life, and although that's not impossible to do, this variant of combo Aromages, I'm just trying to take advantage of the free gain life and snipe 2 cards the opponent has, which, you know, this card doesn't necessarily help with. This is a decent extender, and we could search it off of the Jasmine as, you know, certainly a good option for that, but doesn't get us started, and if anything else, might make it so we have to load our deck down with some more cards that don't necessarily help us get our main combo established. going into that direction, there are some good options to gain life points. First up is an on-theme continuous spell called Aroma Gardening, which says if you control, or rather if you normal or special summon an aroma monster or monsters except during damage step, you can just gain 1,000 life, which makes it very easy to then have higher life than your opponent, especially in the early stages of the game. It also says when your opponent's monster declares an attack on you while your life is lower than your opponent's, you could special summon one of your aromas from your deck, and although each of these abilities is once per turn, remember that Aroma Garden gives you 1,000 life if one of your aroma monsters dies in battle, which means this, in tandem with Aroma Garden, can get you a lot of life points and free monsters to protect you so that you can survive and then, you know, keep going in the next turn. So more of a defensive stall type of an Aromage strategy, definitely doable, but not the kind of aggressive combo strategy that I want to take advantage of with the new destructive Sweet Marjoram. Kind of in that vein, although it's off theme, is Cauldron of the Old Man, reminiscent of Poison, of course. Continuous spell that reads, when this card's activated, place a counter on it, and then you put another counter on it during each of your standby phases. Once per turn, you can either gain 500 life points for each counter on it, or burn your opponent for 300 points for each of the counters on this card. And unlike something like Wave Motion Cannon, you keep the card and its counters all in play. So very interesting in that is recursive life point gain. Probably don't need to burn considering you come out ahead by doing the 500 plus to you every time in this particular deck when you want to have the advantage over the opponent. But overall, again, an additional tool we can use in tandem with the Aroma Gardening and with the Aroma Garden itself. But in this particular build, it's more valuable to have something like Poison of the Old Man or �11𝖊𝖑𝖊𝖓 that's a fast effect that lets us gain life points because we can take advantage of Sweet Marjoram and Dried Winds during your opponent's turn, which is going to give us much more control over the state of the game than just gaining life points and being healthier than your opponent. And finally, the last card in the set is Blessed Winds, a trap card that has 3 interesting, albeit a little lackluster abilities in my opinion. So the first ability lets you take a plant on your field and send it to your graveyard or from your hand to the graveyard in order to gain 500 life points. And since it's a continuous trap, realize that any of these effects can be used during your opponent's turn, much like Humid Winds, and so you could gain life points during your opponent's turn to trigger those abilities. The second one lets you target a plant in your graveyard and shuffle it into the deck, then gain 500 life points. So, okay, the first effect moves something from hand or field to grave, and then the second effect lets you move that from grave to deck, each time giving you 500 life points. And then the last ability is the only hard once per turn among these, is that you could pay 1,000 life points to special summon a aroma monster specifically. Not any plant, unfortunately, but an aroma monster from your graveyard. You can only use that effect of Blessed Winds once per turn, and very interesting card. Again, the first 2 abilities you could keep using if you really wanted to keep gaining life, and it is a way of continuously gaining life during your opponent's turn. But ultimately, I personally feel kind of uncomfortable having a bunch of continuous cards up at once because it just leads your opponent into free pluses off of their Nightmare Phoenix and such. You really don't want to lose advantage just because you have cards face up like that. Dried Winds is a free bonus we get off of our Marjoram, and our Marjoram is something that we can actually win the game with as a monster card, making it so that, yeah, Blessed Winds is a nice way that we can get our life up, but lots of ways we could do it with �11𝖊𝖑𝖏𝑍 and such through the Jasmine, searching it and all that. So ultimately in this particular build, none of these made the cut, but again, lots of potential here, especially if you wanted to go with more of like a defensive, maybe Card of Demise, Pot of Duality style of control Aromages. This definitely would be a set of cards that you would look more into. I just didn't feel they fit perfectly into this combo version of the deck. So now that we've talked about the main goal of the deck, as well as some of the cards that didn't make the cut, let's review real quick as we go into the remainder of the deck, talking more about quantities and going further in the strategy. So as I mentioned, we're starting off with 3 copies of our 𝗿𝗏𝐶𝗳𝗶𝗹𝗲 because this gives us the maximum ability to access our combos, especially when we combo it with 3 copies of Lone Fire Blossom, which not only can be extra copies of 𝗿𝗏𝐶𝗳𝗏𝗃, but the extra normal summon that you get off of the Gem Knight Seraph Knight means we can turn the Lone Fires into any other card in our deck on top of our Predaplant combo. So we're starting off with those 6 cards as our main enabler, 1 copy of �11𝗍𝗍𝗔𝗍 to fetch our 1 Brilliant Fusion, to then send our 1 Gemknight Garnet, and then of course we're using the Light Angelica as our material for the summon of our 1 copy of Gemknight Seraphknight, and then extra normal summon, don't forget, does not stack with Jasmine proper, but it's at least an option that's available to us here. So, you know, very good card to have. We're playing here at least 2 copies, but right now I'm playing a full 3 copies of Aroma Seraphie Jasmine. This card is just amazing, and ultimately, because you want this to be pointing down towards something, it's gonna have to go into your main, or excuse me, your extra monster zone, that primary spot there. And that's why we don't play a ton of other Link monsters. I'll talk about some when we finish out the extra deck, but they're more tech options. You really want to just keep one of these out all game, and then if it dies, replace it with another copy of it. And that's why we're playing at least 2, but again, I'm playing right now 3 copies of the Jasmine. Then from here, you want to have at least 1 copy, but I think 2 copies is okay, of Aroma Seraphie Sweet Marjoram. Main reason I'm only playing 2 copies, even though, you know, you keep summoning them, is all its abilities are hard once per turns. You're not particularly rewarded for having a second copy, but if one happens to die or you use it as material for something, you could summon a second copy and then still have effectively a copy of Dried Winds out to start punishing your opponent every time you gain cards. Turn that into more tangible resource advantage by getting rid of cards. We're playing the maximum number of Aroma Seraphie Angelica, and let me tell you, if I could play like 5 or 6 copies of this, I still would. The fact that it itself will trigger Jasmine in order to fetch another copy of itself, all while gaining you more life points and then triggering the effects of your Dried Winds and your Sweet Marjoram combo. This card is nuts. Plus, it is able to come back from the graveyard, making it a very solid monster as well. But since we can't do that, I'm actually replacing Aroma Garden in this particular build with Poison of the Old Man. Aroma Garden is great, but I did want to make a little bit more space for some of the tech that I wanted in this deck, and so Poison of the Old Man basically became the better alternative. Although, yes, you can't search this with terraforming, so you're technically losing 1 copy of a life gain card, and Aroma Garden has the benefits of attack boost, life gain if your guy dies, and then, you know, making sure your monsters get a little stronger. The Poison is another quick play spell that synergizes perfectly with the Marjoram Dried Winds combo, and it's going to be more relevant to us that we're able to snipe 2 of our opponent's cards every single turn than it is that we have a life point gain that does not expire. Because again, as long as we have copies of Angelica in the deck, the Poison becomes an Angelica, and then that will become basically a loop as long as we have Angelicas remaining. So that's why we're playing these cards here, because they are fast effects. The 1 Dried Winds necessary, or before I was playing 2 copies, mainly just so I could draw it without it clumping too much. 1 copy is plenty when you play the 2 copies of the card to search it out. And honestly, even if you played 1 Sweet Marjoram, you could play, you know, just the 1 Dried Winds and be okay. It's the type of card where if your opponent snipes it, okay, I mean, like, you could play a second copy and argue, oh, but as a backup, but all that really does is make the deck a little less consistent. You could get away with 2 if you really want. I just wanted the 1 because, heck, anytime you summon Marjoram, you have this. Humid Winds is not the best. I've talked about before how I just honestly feel that the Aroma Seraphie Jasmine effectively does everything Humid Winds needs to do, but much more consistently and quickly. And Blessed Winds I talked about, good way to continue gaining life, but not necessarily something that we need to worry about so much. That's kind of the reason we cut Aroma Garden in this deck, is so that we can focus more on fast effects that gain us life. And so just the 1 copy of Dried Winds in here. If you really want another target, play a second of this is what I would recommend. So that's that here. And then to combo with that, 3 copies of Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. This thing is just phenomenal. Don't forget, it may not quite be Max C, but if you have this thing out, your opponent basically can't kill you through monsters they special summon, because every one of the monsters that end up on their final board is going to have gained you life points. Not only does that trigger your abilities like your Dried Winds and your Marjoram, which, don't forget, if that does happen, it is a mandatory effect, so you want to time when you play the Ghost Sister. But Dried Winds has that second ability. If you have at least 3,000 life more than your opponent, at any point you could just pay life points down to equal your opponent's life total, so you're both at the same level, and then you blow up every monster whose attack is less than that total. So basically, could kill your opponent's entire board if they summon monsters that, you know, gave you life over 3,000. So ways that this thing works, it just perfectly synergizes with Dried Winds. I love it as that reason. or for that reason, as the deck's primary hand trap. So that's why we are playing that here. So now, shifting gears, now that we've talked about kind of the main core, we're talking a bit more about the plants, and we'll go to some other aroma tech and then go into the extra deck. So starting off, kind of the classic plant engine, we're playing 𝗿𝗆𝗊𝗍 and Spore as level 1 tuners that come back basically for free and by becoming stronger yet in level, which is good. And then in that, we're also playing our standard Foolish Burial, Monster Reborn, and 1-for-1, which basically lets us access our cards, re-access our cards, including our Lonefire Blossom, and then 1-for-1 is great in this deck because you could also use it on cards like Aromage Support if you really need like an on-theme monster. From there, I'm playing the 1 copy of Rose Lover. This thing says if it's in your graveyard, you can banish it once per turn in order to special summon a plant from your hand, and that card becomes immune from traps for the rest of the turn. You don't care that much unless you're happening to like special summon a Lonefire, and now it can't be hit by like Solemn, I guess, which is okay. The main reason you play this though is this thing is just a level 1 monster, gets another card out of your hand. Effectively, if you synchro or link with this, it becomes another free special summon from your hand, and it makes cards like your Super Solar Nutrient much more consistent. This card basically lets you tribute a level plant that's level 2 or lower in order to special summon one from your deck that is effectively level 4 or 5 or lower. So take the level of the card. If you take a level 2 monster, you add 3 to that, and as long as the monster you're trying to summon from your deck is less than that, you get to go ahead and do that. Or if it's equal, that works as well. So this card is very terribly worded, but effectively it lets you summon out any plant monster from your deck, since we're not playing �11𝗏 or anything like that. So turns all of your tuners and the Rose Lover and such, Angelica, all that I just mentioned, into Lonefire Blossom. And if you have Lonefire Blossom already, you can tribute that for one of these other cards, like a 𝗿𝗆𝗊𝗍 that'll come back anyway, tribute that off of the Super Solar, get another Lonefire Blossom, keep going with your combo, and then, you know, 𝗿𝗆𝗊𝗍 or whatever can come back anyway. So effectively, this becomes 3 more copies of your Lonefire Blossom through all the other cards you're playing, and effectively boosting our core starter count to 9. Although this card's conditional, there are so many targets for this thing that it is always live effectively, and that goes right into, you know, the main aroma section of our main deck here too. We are playing the 3 Jasmine. This card is still the best Aromage card. Every time you gain life points once per turn, each copy of these lets you draw a card that works during your turn or your opponent's turn. That's awesome. And although it does not give you an additional normal summon when you've already used Seraph Knight's effect, it is an alternative option. That's actually why I didn't play Gem Knight, Seraph Knight, and Brilliant Fusion in the previous build. There wasn't an incentive when you already have the extra normal summon through this card. The way the cards are worded and ruled, basically any card that says an additional normal summon is going to be all in one category, and then they all can't stack. They all are mutually exclusive. If it said something like double summon or chain summoning, where it gives you an additional fixed number of summons, you could do that. But unfortunately, you know, can't double this with the Gem Knight, but still an awesome card. No reason not to play it. You're going to use this thing, especially now that we have Poison of the Old Man. You're going to get draws off of your opponent's turn even more often. And again, level 2 monster you contribute off for Super Solar if you really need to. Then I'm playing just 1 copy of Aromage Rosemary. I was originally playing 3 copies of this in the previous build, but the reason I cut this down is because most of the time when I'm making my summons, this thing is good because it gives me some more levels, but I don't really need more than 1, maybe 2 in most situations. But typically I only need 1 copy of this. The main ability you want off of this is if your life is higher, any of your plants can kill your opponent's cards without letting your opponent's monster effects respond to you. So no floating, no hand trap type responses. So decent card in that aspect. But main reason I finally decided to cut it, other than need for space, is because we are still playing World Carrot Weight Champion, and this level 4 plant tuner, or excuse me, non-tuner, can let you sack any plant you control or in your hand in order to revive this from the graveyard once per turn. So effectively, this becomes the level 4 monster you would need. Rosemary's still nice as an on-theme level 4 monster, has a bonus ability when you have the 1 copy, but in terms of summoning it for materials, I mean, Carrot Weight Champion does the job very nicely and synergizes with everything in the deck, so that's why we're playing that. Basically, a couple level 4 monsters to get that going. 3 copies of Called by the Grave, because this protects us from, oh my gosh, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, Ghost Ogre, and Snow Rabbits. Just gonna slay this deck because you don't want to get your Marjoram or your Dried Winds killed. Do remember that those are mandatory effects, as is Jasmine, so you want to build your chains carefully. Make sure the card you would most want to protect is Chainlink 1, so that it's protected from your opponent's Ghost Ogre, but sometimes you don't have the luxury of doing that, and so, you know, having something like Called by the Grave helps make your combos go off more consistently, and then it's, of course, a decent counter to a lot of decks as well, so not a bad option to have in general. And then the last card in the main, some spicy tech, recommended to me by a subscriber. There was a guy who asked me, hey, what do you think about Twilight Rose Knight? And I literally told him, I forgot this was a card, but I think it's awesome. It's a level 3 warrior tuner monster that says your opponent cannot select plants as attack targets, and then when this is normal summon, you can just special summon a level 4 or lower plant monster from your hand. So effectively, this thing lets you turn your dead copies of Lone Fire Blossom, dead Lone Fire, you know, but definitely �11𝗏𝗏 into your Marjoram play very easily because it is a tuner monster. It lets you turn like your Carrot-Weight and your Rosemary into a Black Rose play, which has saved me a lot of situations as well. But ultimately what it ends up doing is it synergizes with the rest of your plants. If you summon Lone Fire off of this, or Darlingtonia, or not Darlingtonia, the �11𝗏𝗏 directly off of this, you still get to combo off, and then you simply have a level 3 tuner monster. You can tune that into another play. You could combine it with like Seraph Knight if you have another monster you can use as material instead. Lots of flexibility and combo potential created off of this one card, so I honestly feel like it is worth having in the deck. It's just a very good card. Does it necessarily have to be 3? I don't know. Part of it is I kind of wanted to experiment with this card, and I don't know, I haven't been disappointed with it yet, so I definitely like this in a faster build. It lets you get your plays off a bit more easily, and if your opponent happens to hit it with Ghost Ogre or something, then honestly they just blew a card because they really should be using it on like your �11𝗏𝗏𝗏 or something along those lines. So there's the main deck there. That's 40. Now to talk about the rest of the extra deck, we have a Nightmare Phoenix to help round out our Link 2s. This thing you basically summon under the your Jasmine. You don't really want to put this in your extra monster zone, but having removal for spell and traps is still useful here, so I think it's worth having the copy of that. For Link 4s, I play the one �11𝗏𝗏𝗏 and the one 𝗤𝗏 Sword. You're not going for these all the time, but these are cards you can go off of with your Jasmine when you no longer need the combo potential. You just want to kill your opponent, you could go for this, or you could summon �11𝗏𝗏𝗏, sometimes even underneath Jasmine as well, because it doesn't have to be pointing to anything in particular, so that's why these cards are in here. They're not reliant on their arrows to make plays, and �11𝗏𝗏𝗏 adds the best defense that you can get in a Link monster right now, whereas the 𝗤𝗏 Sword adds the best offense that you can do, allowing a deck like this to kill your opponent out of nowhere, and sometimes even take the lead in life points if you can't just win the game. So there's that. I like the one copy of 𝗍𝗐, the World Chalice Justiciar, because it is a Synchro tuner monster. We can easily summon this off of something like a World Carrot-Weight Champion or off of Twilight Rose Knight, which I want to actually mention as well. Twilight Rose is also phenomenal because if you normal summon that, you special summon Jasmine. Not only can you go for something like this, but Jasmine, if you have higher life, lets you get an additional normal summon. So it basically helps you extend even further, but I digress. This card is a Synchro tuner monster that upon summon lets you add World Legacy Succession to your hand, and since you're planning on always having access to a copy of Aromaseraphie Jasmine, you should have the zone that you can Monster Reborn a card into. Doesn't negate its effects, so that could be Lone Fire Blossom to basically Joker for anything in your deck. It could be one of your key cards like Sweet Marjoram directly. Lots of really cool combos you could do with this, and you could even use Justiciar as a material as well, so I like it for that reason. We have a single copy of Aromaseraphie Rosemary. This card is honestly, I kind of think Sweet Marjoram is what I wished Rosemary would have been a long time ago. This card's able to blank a face-up card on the field. Not a bad effect, but, you know, not the main thing you want to go for. Sometimes it does come up, though, and since it's a different level, it's worth having at least in the extra deck. And then it has the ability to power up all your plants as well, which is a decent power boost now that we're not playing Aroma Garden. You know, a nice field buff is pretty good, but how often do you summon this really? It's kind of questionable. It's like if you need a second monster because the combo potential is here with the succession, it's not bad having. But you really just focus on the Sweet Marjoram in this particular deck. So she's in here as an honorary member, but I don't know if she's really, you know, as necessary now. For level 7, we play Black Rose Dragon, because don't forget, not only does this bomb the field if you summon it off of something like Twilight Rose Knight or whatever, or Spore, but you can also just banish a plant from your graveyard, and then that'll allow you to go and change a defense monster to attack position. You slam them for the full attack of your monster. Can help you gain the lead in life if you need that. So very good card for that. 𝗤𝗏 �11 is from the last deck as well. Basically, this thing gets an Omni Negate and half the attack of the Link monster that you have in your graveyard that you attach to this. Most of the time, that's going to be your J.D.Gaming. So pretty solid card for that purpose. And then, I mean, it's basically just going to be a 3900 attack, 2 turns back to back of negate any card if you need. So very powerful there. And then right now, I'm playing Cyframe Lord Omega and Trishula as another level 8 and then as a level 9 monster. You could play something like 𝗍𝗔𝖄, but I just found myself not really going for it quite as often, because whereas you could turn, you know, all those materials into 𝗍𝗔𝖄, the basic game plan of this deck has changed. You want to keep your Jasmine out even longer because it confers the free searches and the protection ability onto your sweet Marjoram, who then also protects the Jasmine and itself from being targeted as well. So that combo is just so relevant. I don't want to turn my resources into something even as powerful as 𝗍𝗔𝖄. So oftentimes, you know, these guys like Omega, you could summon off of something like Spore. Same thing with Black Rose and the other card as well, the 𝗿𝗏𝖇𝖑𝖊𝓐. So that's why these cards are in here. Omega is also nice in addition to just being Omega. Don't forget you can push your 𝗍𝗇𝑑 back to your graveyard every turn, so you have a free monster to summon as long as your life is higher and you have Jasmine or some other card on the board. So that's why this card's in here. And then Trishula, very easy to summon. It's very reminiscent of classic plants. I was like, well, I don't really want to play some of these old Link monsters that I did in the previous build because my Link ratings are so... You know, I don't know. Like, I don't really want to use the Link ratings just to upgrade. I'd rather keep the monsters that are, you know, the Link 2s and such in play. So what do you turn your resources into? You summon something like Trishula instead to demolish your opponent's setup and then end the game that way. If you watched the video in its entirety, thanks! Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the creation of this deck as much as I did putting it together. We'll start off with the main deck here. Flat 40 as always. We have triple Aromage Jasmine, single Aromage Rosemary, and triple Aromaseraphie Angelica. Then we have triple Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood, lone Glow Up Bulb, triple Lone Fire Blossom, one Predaplant Darling Tonia Cobra, and triple Ophrys Scorpio. Then we have a single Rose Lover, Spore, and then triple Twilight Rose Knight, and then one World Carrot Weight Champion, and a Gem Knight Garnet for our monsters. Then for our spells, we have one Brilliant Fusion, triple Called by the Grave, one Foolish Burial, Monster Reborn, and 1-for-1. Triple Poison of the Old Man, triple Super Solar Nutrient, and a World Legacy Succession, as well as one Dried Winds as our lone trap card to search off of the sweet Marjoram. And then for our extra deck here, we have 3 copies of our Aromaseraphie Jasmine, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and then for Link 4s, we have 𝗍𝗿𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖏, Bow of the Goddess, and Boral Sword Dragon. Then for our Synchro monsters, we have Aromaseraphie, Rosemary, and 𝗵, World Chalice Justiciar as our level 5s, 2 copies of Aromaseraphie Sweet Marjoram as our level 6, a Black Rose Dragon at level 7, 𝗿𝗏𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓, and Cyframe Lord Omega as level 8, and then the mighty Trishula at level 9, and of course our Gem Knight Seraph Knight for our Brilliant Fusion target. That's it for now, but feel free to grab one of these videos on your way out. If you really enjoyed what you saw today, remember to subscribe to JDGaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JDGaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.